trust shattered like glass under a boot, leaving shards with the imprint of her lies. But in the silence of the empty house, a plan was born, where every step is a minefield for those who dared to betray. Don't miss the finale. Here, revenge does not scream, it explodes the silence. The unraveling began in the quiet spaces, the pauses between sentences, the empty side of the bed still warm when I woke, the way Sarah's laughter dissolved into silence when I entered a room. We'd built 12 years on routines. Coffee brewed black at 6 a.m., her gym sessions every Tuesday and Thursday, my late returns from construction sites smelling of sawdust and sweat. But that spring, the rhythm fractured. She started leaving earlier, returning later, her yoga mat untouched in the trunk of her Lexus. I told myself it was a phase, a new hobby, a fleeting restlessness. The first concrete anomaly arrived on a Thursday evening. I'd come home early to surprise her, a bouquet of peonies clutched in my calloused hand. Her favorite, though she'd never admit it. The house stood empty, but her car idled in the driveway, engine humming. Through the kitchen window, I watched her scroll her phone, face illuminated by its glow. Her smile, sharp and private, was one I hadn't seen in years. When she noticed me, the light vanished. She tucked the phone into her purse like a smuggled secret. I began cataloging deviations. Mondays, she'd claim grocery runs but return with no bags. Fridays, she'd wear jasmine perfume, a scent she'd once called cloying when her sister gifted it for Christmas. Her phone, once left charging on the nightstand, now slept under her pillow. One night, reaching for her in bed, my hand brushed cold linen. The digital clock read 2:17 a.m. Downstairs, I found her in the backyard, whispering into her phone, backlit by the moon. She didn't turn when I coughed, didn't flinch. The receipts started appearing. Folded gas station slips from towns 30 miles north. A charge for a boutique hotel near the lake, $4.50 for a single night. I tucked them into the pocket of my work jacket, the paper crisp as betrayal. At the construction site, I'd unfold them during lunch breaks, tracing the dates with grease-stained fingers. They spanned months. Then came the watch. Sarah had always hated jewelry, her wrists bare save for her platinum wedding band. But one evening, as she chopped vegetables, a glint caught my eye, a man's Rolex, thick and industrial, sliding down her forearm as she reached for a knife. She noticed my stare and tugged her sleeve, the blade slipping, nicking her finger. Blood bloomed on the cutting board. We didn't speak as I bandaged her hand, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird. The Rolex haunted me. I sketched it from memory during site meetings, the black dial, the etched serial number, the scratch along the left lug. A contractor recognized it. Voss's watch, he said, squinting at my drawing. CFO at Harborview. Flashes that thing at every bid. Eric Voss, the man who'd awarded me the waterfront high-rise contract 6 months prior. The man who'd clapped my shoulder at the groundbreaking, his grip too tight, eyes lingering on Sarah as she handed me a thermos of coffee. I drove to Harborview's headquarters that night, the Rolex's serial number burning in my pocket. The night guard, a retired cop I'd shared whiskey with at a charity event, let me into the parking garage. Eric's Porsche sat in its reserved spot, windows fogged. Through the haze, I saw it, the watch on the dashboard, moonlight catching its edges. I photographed it, the camera flash muffled under my jacket. The confirmation should have shattered me. Instead, it crystallized something cold and precise. Sarah hadn't stumbled into an affair. She'd engineered it. Eric's recent divorce, his rumored payout, the way he joked about prenups at the gala, this wasn't passion. It was a merger. I spent days mapping their patterns. Sarah's yoga classes aligned with Eric's long lunches. Her sudden interest in investment portfolios dovetailed with Harborview's offshore filings. She'd even begun dyeing her hair, auburn streaks to match the CFO's ex-wife. The more I uncovered, the clearer their endgame became. Drain my accounts, leverage my construction access for corporate espionage, vanish before the high-rise completion left me liable for any accidents. The final piece fell into place at the site. Buried in blueprints, I found altered load-bearing specs, Eric's initials on documents, rerouting steel shipments to a shell company. They weren't just stealing from me, they were building a tomb. That night, I stood in our bedroom doorway, watching Sarah sleep. Moonlight caught the Rolex peeking from her nightstand. I thought of the thermos she'd brought me, laced with sedatives the week the faulty beams arrived, of the life insurance policy she'd nudged me to increase. For the first time, I saw the woman beneath the lies, not a stranger, but a predator who'd studied my habits, my trust, my love. I packed a duffel bag, took the spare keys to my foreman's cabin upstate, and began drafting a new blueprint, not of buildings but of ruin. Every affair leaves structural weaknesses. Every betrayal has a load-bearing wall. I would let them dig their own foundation, then pull the permits. The blueprint of their destruction required patience. I started with the steel, corroded rebar, delivered to Harborview's waterfront site under falsified inspection tags. Eric's signature, forged with the precision of a man who'd studied his every flourish, authorized the shipment. Let him explain why grade 60 steel turned to rust within weeks. Let him stand in that half-built skeleton when the first storm hit. Sarah's role in their scheme became transparent. She'd taken over our finances, redirecting savings into offshore accounts labeled as contractor fees. I mirrored her moves, siphoning smaller amounts into a shadow account under Eric's name. Each transfer left digital breadcrumbs, IP addresses linked to his office, timestamps matching his lunch breaks. When the IRS audit came, they'd follow the trail to his doorstep, not mine. I cultivated paranoia, left Harborview invoices in her gym bag, the totals circled in red, planted news clippings about corporate espionage arrests under her car visor, watched her scrub her laptop history every night, unaware I'd installed keyloggers during her spa weekends. Her search terms grew frantic. Untraceable poisons, how to disappear, prenup loopholes. Eric's downfall began with concrete. I adjusted the mix ratios for the 30th floor pillars, subtle enough to pass inspections, fatal under sustained weight. The poor date coincided with his birthday. I imagined him toasting champagne in that penthouse suite Sarah booked, unaware his monument to greed was already crumbling. Sarah's physical tells betrayed their timeline. She stopped wearing the Rolex, opting for a slim fitness tracker, began composting, though she'd once mocked dirt rituals. I found shredded documents in the compost bin, flight itineraries to Belize, offshore bank details, pieced them back together with tape and photographed each scrap. Let her think she was erasing evidence. All she did was label it. I became a ghost in my own life. Attended site meetings, nodded through Eric's speeches about legacy, all while documenting every code violation. Took graveyard shifts to plant faulty fireproofing materials, their expiration dates altered. The night watchman, a former union buddy, looked the other way for a bottle of bourbon and an envelope of cash. Sarah's attempts to probe my awareness grew comical. She'd accidentally leave divorce pamphlets on the coffee table, sigh over articles about amicable splits. I played the dutiful fool, bringing her chamomile tea, massaging her temples as she spun tales of migraines and stress. Her skin smelled different, sour, like fierce sweat beneath the jasmine perfume. The turning point came during a city inspection. I'd rerouted the team to the east wing, away from the compromised pillars. Eric, eager to impress, led them straight to the weak points. Solid as a vault, he boomed, slapping a pillar. The inspector's thermal scanner flashed orange, moisture levels critical. I held my breath as the man frowned, tapped his tablet, then moved on. Eric didn't notice, but the report would be filed. The seed planted. Sarah accelerated their plans, maxed out credit cards, withdrew cash in odd increments, $9, $9.99, just below reporting thresholds, packed a go bag with passports and burner phones. I tracked her movements through the tile tracker sewn into her yoga mat, watched her circle the airport for hours before returning home, nerves frayed. The final piece was poetic. Harborview's solar panel array, a PR stunt, relied on lithium batteries prone to thermal runaway. I disabled the cooling systems, set the temperature sensors to underreport by 20 degrees. On the night of their gala, as Eric schmoozed investors under those very panels, I sent an anonymous tip to the fire department. Chemical leak, the report claimed. Let him sweat through his tuxedo as engines surrounded his death trap. Sarah's unraveling mirrored the buildings. She stopped sleeping, her eyes hollow as the elevator shafts I'd sabotaged, began checking doors and windows, unaware I'd replaced the locks weeks ago. Her phone buzzed incessantly, Eric's panic seeping through encrypted apps. I let her stew, knowing every frantic message tightened the noose. When the Department of Labor subpoena arrived, I framed it and hung it in my office, a work of art. Harborview's violations listed like poetry. Sarah found it during one of her nocturnal prowls. I watched through the nanny cam as she traced the words, her reflection warped in the glass. She didn't weep, didn't rage, just stood there, perfectly still, as the foundation of her escape plan cracked beneath her. The high-rise collapse began with a whisper, a fissure in parking level B2, undocumented in the logs. Then a creak, a groan, dust sifting through vents. By dawn, the site would be red-tagged. By noon, Eric's stock portfolio would hemorrhage. And by dusk, Sarah would realize there were no lifeboats left. Just two rats scrambling aboard a sinking ship, unaware I'd already set the flares. The high-rise fell not with a roar, but a sigh, a slow exhale of steel and glass, folding inward like a house of cards in reverse. From my cabin's porch, 50 miles north, I watched the live feed on a burner phone. News helicopters circled the dust cloud, their spotlights carving through the haze. Anchors sputtered about structural failures, pending investigations, miracles that no workers were inside. They didn't mention the guard dog I'd lured away with raw steak, or the homeless man I'd paid to chain the exits hours before. Some heroes wear invisibility like a second skin. Eric's face dominated the screen within hours. Stock footage of him grinning at the groundbreaking now cut to mugshots, his tailored suits replaced by a paper jumpsuit. The SEC had frozen his assets, tracing the offshore leaks to a Cayman account bearing Sarah's fingerprints. She'd panicked, transferring funds minutes before the collapse, a fatal mistake that linked her to every permit he'd forged. I'd left her one escape route. A dummy corporation under her maiden name, its board members all deceased. She took the bait, signing documents that funneled the money into a phantom ledger. The trap snapped shut as she pressed send. Sarah's unraveling was quieter, more intimate. She returned to our house, now a hollow shell stripped of anything valuable, and paced its empty rooms. Security cameras captured her nights. Screaming into pillows, shredding photo albums, digging up the backyard in search of emergency cash I'd long since relocated. She missed the safe buried beneath the azaleas by 6 inches, her manicured nails snapping against unyielding clay. I orchestrated their reunion, leaked Eric's jail location to her burner phone, knowing she'd risk visitation for a shred of salvation. They met in a plexiglass booth, his face gaunt, hers splotchy with expired foundation. No touching, no tenderness, just two feral animals hissing through glass. I'd paid a guard to leave the audio feed unencrypted. Their voices, tinny and desperate, filled my cabin silence. You promised. You spent. We're ruined. I muted them. Their words mattered less than the body language. The way Eric's cuffed hands slammed the divider, how Sarah's mascara pooled in her collarbone. They'd loved greed, not each other. Now they'd choke on it. The final step was erasure. I torched the cabin, leaving a carbonized shell with a propane tank rigged to malfunction. Packed my tools into a rental van, the license plate swapped twice. Drove south until the pines gave way to desert, where a new identity waited in a Phoenix storage unit. Passports, cash, a deed to a ranch with a view of untouched mesas. Sarah's last act was poetic. She'd mailed a letter to our old address, postmarked the day before her arrest. The ranch's previous owner forwarded it, recognizing my alias. Inside, a single sheet of hotel stationery. I know it was you. No plea, no regret, just 5 words in shaky cursive. I burned it in the ranch's iron stove, watching the edges curl black. Let her rot with the knowledge that I'd won. Months later, a real estate developer called. The Harborview site, now a crater filled with litigation, was up for auction. Prime downtown land, he enthused, could build a monument there. I declined, but recommended a Japanese garden, koi ponds over graves, cherry blossoms to mask the scent of decay. Some nights, I hiked the mesa's ridge, the desert wind scouring my skin. Below, my horses graze in moonlight, their coats silvered, manes flickering like smoke. I've learned to appreciate ruins. They remind me that collapse isn't an end, but an invitation. To bury, to plant, to wait for roots to split the rubble. Sarah's trial starts next week. I will watch. Let her cling to the lie that I'm haunted. The truth is simpler. I've become the architect of my silence, building peace from the bones of their greed. And in this vast, indifferent landscape, that's the purest revenge, living fully as if they never existed. One story may be ending, but the excitement never stops. Don't wait. Jump right into the next one and keep the thrill alive.